Hey guys, it's Beth, and today I have a quick share of some of the cards I made using the scrap kits that I referenced in my March crafty goal update. So if you haven't seen that, I will link that in the cards as well as in the description box below. But what I did is I had a gallon size baggie full of scraps. It was like overflowing of scraps, and it had been sitting on my desk. I got tired of looking at it. And so I went through one weekend and I sorted them all out by pattern and then by size, and then tried to cut them down and put them into like groups of whatever size they were. So I had one bag, I did like smaller baggies. I had one bag that was full of like just different size squares. This bag was full of different size circles. I had some larger scrap pieces, and then this was full of like strips. And then I did this is some that I think would work well on a little mini note card. So I tried to group them all by their size and their purpose. And felt like if I had that done, like I took the time to do that, then whenever I had some time, I could work on putting the cards together. So this past week, we went camping. We have a camper, and so on spring and fall break, we like to take it out for like a week or so at a time just to get away. And I took that kit with me. And so along with that kit, I just went through and grabbed quickly some cardstock scraps that were in colors that I thought would go with the patterns that I had. So I didn't try and match up anything exactly. I literally just went through each color and pulled a little bit out, just ones that I thought would work. And then I did take some flower stickers, some pre-stamped and pre-printed sentiments that I had on hand already. And then I have a compartmentalized bin that's full of punched or in die cut shapes that I've cut out of scraps of cardstock. And so I took that just to have some embellishments if I needed them. And then I took my trimmer and my adhesive gun. So all of that fit in 2 iris bins. And in our camper, I just slid them in the storage space underneath one of the benches in our little dinette, our table area. And then would pull it out. Oh, and I did card bases. I took some card bases too. And then when I had a little bit of time, I would pull out and either sort or fold card bases or whatever. Because we always have downtime at some point in the day, in the morning as everybody's trying to wake up, or after the girls go to bed and we're tired of being outside. It's just kind of a way for me to unwind. And then I did get our second to last day there. We had been going for several days and we were all tired, and it had rained overnight, so it was all wet outside. So we had a lazy morning, and so I got a few hours that I was able to work on cards. The girls were just coloring, and my husband was actually doing some work. So I took advantage of that time, and then on our last day there, I couldn't sleep. I woke up early, and so I actually got several hours of card making in before anybody else woke up. So that was nice. So in that amount of time, I made 50 cards and used up a good portion of the scraps. This is what I haven't used yet. So just kind of walk through the cards I made, the sketches I used, and kind of my thought process and everything. I had this big bag full of scraps, of circle scraps, and so I did use most of them, but I regret now cutting so many into circles. At the time when I was sorting and cutting the scraps, trying to put the kits together, I punched circles because it was quicker than actually I don't have a square punch, and so it was quicker than going through and trimming out squares. But I kind of regret that now because I got tired of the circles. For some reason they were harder for me to use. I don't know. But I found a new sketch, not one I've used before, and it is Mojo Monday, sketch number 345. And I used 2-inch circles on most of these. So each card has a strip of cardstock on the left-hand side here, and then various number of circles on the right-hand side. And in most cases, even though the sketch called for this fishtail banner down here with the sentiment, I actually had a bunch of ones that were already punched in circles, and so I just used those to go along to keep it easy. In this one, I actually had 4 different patterns that kind of coordinated well together. So this one actually has all different patterns. got several of those. And then I had some pattern paper that was double-sided. So in this case, I used 2 circles with each side. And this one was also double-sided. And then here, in this case, I used all of the same pattern. And this one, I didn't have as many, or for some reason, I wanted to try and use up the small circles too, so I just did a little different layout on that one. But this is closer to the other layout I'd been using. I just used 3 of the 2-inch circles. This was another double-sided one. And then here I actually used, again, all the same pattern because it didn't really fit with any of the other patterns that I had. Here I used 2 different that I felt they coordinated well because this is kind of like a bluish shiny pattern, and then you've got the silver with a little bit of glitter and shine in it, so I just put those together and I got a bunch of those. And then this one is using all of the same pattern again. So I tried to keep it simple, like none of these cards are overly embellished or overly detailed. I tried to keep them simple, and I was kind of limited with what I could do with them anyway based on the paper I was using and the cardstock that I took, which actually I think worked out better. Less choice worked out better in this case for me. This doesn't necessarily have like a brand name, but it just says Sunday Sketch from January 27th of 2013. And I followed the sketch loosely. They had theirs all, the circles all grouped together. I spread mine out like evenly over the card, but I did use this fishtail here. And so these are the patterns again that all coordinated. So I used all the patterns together on this one. They're 1.5-inch circles, I think, and then there's obviously 12. And here I had a whole bunch of these. So I did all the same pattern on the same, on one card. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 281. Excuse me. And again, this is using 2-inch circles. And this time it's just 3, and then you've got a strip that goes like the short way across the card, and then it has like some flower embellishments. And so I used either all the same pattern or some like coordinating patterns. Like these are all the same. These are using the same patterns, but it's 2 different coordinating. And this one I only had 2 circles, so I just used a cardstock piece for the other circle. But then I used like that bin of little punch shapes that I took. I have a bunch of different shaped and sized flowers in there, and so I pulled out some of the flowers that kind of matched the cardstock. So they're all kind of different. And I would have loved to have like maybe a colored cardstock background for my card mat here, like this light pink would have been great, or I don't know. I don't love all the white. If you've watched my videos, you know I have an issue with too much white space. So this is a little bit too much white space for me, but it is clean and simple. And again, I was working with what I had. And so it works. A lot of people like clean and simple. I'm just, unfortunately, not one of them on my cards, on my scrapbook pages, or in my life, really. I'm all about the busyness. But here's another kind of clean and simple one, and it's another new sketch for me. It's Freshly Made Sketches, number 313. And it just has these circles down here in the corner and then up here in the corner. And so I was short like one larger circle, and so in my bin of punch shapes, I actually had like this reddish circle. And it's a little bit smaller than, I think, I don't even know what the size, it's just slightly smaller than the circle up here at the top. But it works. And then when I got home, I stamped Thinking of You directly onto the card base for that one. And then this is Reverse Confetti sketch number 33. And I think I've used this one once or twice on my Pad Kill card shares. And I did use a cardstock mat on this one just because I felt like it needed something. It was just too plain. But I layered 2 different shades of gray cardstock for the rectangular pieces. And then I used the coordinating pattern paper circles on the top, and then added my sentiment as just a little fishtail banner in the center. And then the last of the circles, this is kind of where I was struggling, and I was trying to use up as many of the same pattern circles as I could together, rather than having like so many random patterns left that I would put on a card later. And so I had just kind of fiddled around, like laying all the circles out, and kind of came upon this arrangement. And it's just like a bunch of there's like 4 2-inch circles that are layered on there, and then some smaller circles that are tucked in behind. And I just grouped them together and then did a little circle sentiment there in the center. Same thing. The light blue is not showing up very well against the white. And this one is very shiny. I apologize for any glare. Put a bunch of circles again. And this one, I didn't want to put this orange and white on directly onto the white, and so I had put it onto a black card, mat to pop out, and then I realized it screamed Halloween to me. It was either Halloween or pirate, and I didn't really have any pirate embellishments, so I went with the Halloween theme. And then when I came home, I went through my stash and I found these little they're like clear spider stickers. And then I had this Halloween sentiment already stamped, and so I just cut it into a fishtail. So went with the Halloween theme on that one. And then just another way that I laid out all the different circles. And sorry, this one's kind of shiny again too. And then I moved on to squares. And when I went through my scraps, I sorted them by width and like shape, or like mainly like width and pattern, sorry. And then I tried to, when I was doing the squares, I tried to cut off as little as possible from each strip. So if the strip was like just over 1.5, then I may have trimmed it down to 1.5. But if it was 1 3/4, then I made it a 1 3/4 square. If it was 2, I made it like a 2-inch square. I just tried to keep it close to whatever width it was originally, so I wasn't creating more scrap for myself. And you guys have seen this sketch before if you followed me for a while. It's one of my favorite sketches, and I think I use it on every single pad kill that I do, just because it's such a great way to use up all those scraps you have at the end. But it's Operation Right Home, sketch number 154. And the original sketch calls for 1.5-inch squares of your pattern, which I have here, and then a 3.5-inch mat behind it. So this one I actually did fairly true to the sketch. So like with the 1.5-inch squares and the 3.5-inch mat. And then down here I cut a strip of cardstock, to be the width of my pink mat up there, and then I found some pink flowers. And this one was actually double-sided, and so this brown is the back side of the pink striped, and so I actually had enough of this particular pattern scrap that I was able to do the mat with the brown side, and then the strip down here with the brown side, and then did my squares with the pattern side. And then the flowers here are also, one of them is like the same shade of pink, and I found those in my little bin of punch shapes. So in this one, I just did something a little bit different down here, is I layered some strips for my strip that goes across, and then I just used a circle that's the same print as my squares. And I did not mat this one because I had the craft mat going all the way around it. These two patterns, I only had like 2 squares of each, and so I decided that they were going to coordinate whether they really did or not. But I think they look okay together, especially on this like orangish craft cardstock that's behind it. And so again, I just used the circle of one of the papers down here. And these cute little bees and ladybugs, I made some Valentine's cards for Valentine's Day, like little 3.5 by 5-inch cards, and then I had put Be Mine on them, and so I had some of the sentiments left over as well as some scraps of the paper. So I kind of went with stayed with the Valentine's theme, did Be Mine, and then did a little heart down here on the strip. So I got a few of those. And then on this one, I had 3 of the striped blue paper and then 1 of like the little swirl paper. And I felt they coordinated well enough that I was going to go ahead and use them together. So I did that, and then I had a circle of the swirl paper, so that is what my embellishment is down here. And then this one was like several different patterns that I felt kind of went together. And then I did a strip that went all the way across the bottom down here and then used a circle of one of the patterns. And then these are all the same, just different parts of like the pattern within the paper, the 4 squares, and then I did a square from that paper down here at the bottom. And these, you can say, like this must have been a wider strip because these squares are bigger. And also, on the inside of the card, I tried to use up any strips that I had left. I just used them to decorate the inside of the card, just so it wasn't going to go to waste. So not every card has something on the inside, but most do. Here's just another variation on those squares. And you saw this before, they were smaller squares with a pink mat behind it. These I did with a larger square and no mat. And this is one where I had 4 different pieces again that kind of went together, so that's what we went with. And then I did have a strip of this patterned here, and so I used it across the bottom, and also the circle is the same pattern. Just layered that with flour. And then one more. So several different ways to use the same sketch depending on what size scraps that you might have. And then I also had some larger scrap pieces, and so I decided to put them together to make like one bigger element instead of cutting them down into smaller pieces. So here, this is actually 2 pieces, and there's a gap like right here across the middle, and I just used a piece of cardstock to cover the gap, so it looks like it's just one solid piece of the mushrooms. And then did my embellishment or my sentiment in the center there. And then I kind of followed the same format, except for these pieces were actually thinner strips and they were vertical orientation, so I put them side by side, and I left the gap this time, but kept my cardstock strip and my sentiment here going across the middle. And then you can tell I was working with whatever pieces of cardstock I had, because here's a thicker but shorter banner that goes across the middle, otherwise the rest of the card's the same. And this pattern, it's the same as the mushrooms, but it's just the paper had a different orientation. So I put them this way, and I left the black strip in the middle just because I wanted to break up the words a little bit since they didn't really flow together well. And then I put my little hello sentiment on some red cardstock to make it pop. Same thing. And then you can tell here kind of that I was working with whatever scraps I had, so it was like 2 different shades of red. And then the strips were narrow and going the other way, so I covered the gap on this one with a piece of red, like a strip of red, just so again it's something that would help everything pop. And then here's the same card but with the red and black flip-flopped. And then I decided to do something a little bit different, and so I kind of staggered these 2 pieces and overlapped them, and then still did my fishtail across the center with my sentiment. So, and then I had a bunch of various size strips of various patterns. So these were actually left over, I think it's baseball themed. It was from a sports scrapbook I had done a long time ago. And so I decided that I could still use them on a card, and I just kind of left, made sure I highlighted some legible words, because I think this says, actually used to say batting practice, so I at least left play, and then went with like a birthday adventure theme sentiment over here. So maybe a good birthday card for a boy, younger boy. And then I had 2 different deer patterns that thought they worked well together, and they were longer strips, so I cut them down and used 2 of each on here and then anchored them with this brown cardstock. And then after this card, I had like 1 piece left of each pattern. And so I used just a brown piece of cardstock, like layered on top of them, like to kind of pull them together. My only regret on this card is I wish I would have done like fishtails on the top and the bottom of each piece to give it a little more detail. This one's a little plain to me, but... And then these strips were actually from the pad cover to my DCWV fall and Halloween stack that I killed off last fall. I don't know why I had saved these. I don't know if it was for a specific purpose, but they were in my scrap bag, so I went ahead and used them together. I didn't have to cut them down. Was able to use them at the size that they were, and I just put the 2 down on the ends and then put the red one kind of overlapped on top of them in the middle. So these are actually part of a pad cover. So pad cover scraps can also be used. And then I did get 1 mini note card made. This one's like 2.5 by 3, I think. And I had some football paper also left from a sports scrapbook that I did. And the paper itself, the pattern paper itself, wasn't wide enough to cover the front of the card. And I didn't really have anything good to mix with it, and so I just took the pattern paper and fussy cut out the footballs. I was able to get 1.5 footballs out of it, and then put the full one here in the center, and then the partial one going off the bottom. And so I still want to add like a little "for you" sentiment on this one or something. But and then my last card is not actually paper scraps, but it is. It was in the embellishments, like in the sticker bag, of like the flower sticker bag that I had taken along. And I have had this Provo Craft Standouts sticker pack. The copyright date, I don't know if you can see that, says 2003. So I don't know if it's really been in my stash since 2003. If it has, then like that's kind of embarrassing, but I've always thought that it would make a great card just because it came with this frame and this girl and then all these little flower stickers and everything's popped up on foam already, and then like this little spring label. And I always thought it would make a great card. It was in my stash and I totally forgot about it. So when I was flipping through my flower embellishments when I was making these cards, I ran across this and I'm like, oh yeah, I was going to make a card. And so I actually happen to have a piece of cardstock and got it's kind of, I think, close to a 5x7 card. And just the foam, I mean, even if it really is from 2003, the foam is holding up really well. Like, I can't pull it off. So I decided to go ahead and use it. So I took the frame and I took the girl, put her in the middle. And then I have, like, this is 2 flowers that were together on one's embellishment. And since it's on foam, I put the foam, like I made sure that the foam was sticking to the card base, but then overlapped the petals onto the frame here. And then I did the same thing with these 2 flowers. They're 2 separate flowers that are up here. And then I just added 2 flowers kind of on either side of her. And then this "for you" sentiment. So that's what, 16 years? It took me 16 years to make this silly little card. But I think it's pretty, and I think it would make a great birthday card for some little girl who loves fairies and flowers. I know my daughters love pink and purple and fairies, so be a great birthday card. But that's what I'm saying, like, so much stuff gets in your stash and you forget what you have. I mean, at least me anyway. Hopefully somebody else out there is the same way, but... So overall, like, I like my kit idea. Like I said, I regret cutting so many circles because I started to hate the circles at some point. And at first I was kind of bummed that I was limited in like the cardstock that I had and the embellishments, but then once I got into it, I realized being limited was good. It's like that whole KISS method. I just kept it simple. I didn't have as much to choose from. It either kind of worked or it didn't work at all. So if it kind of worked, that's what I went with. Whereas if I would have done this at home and had all of my stash, I would have like searched through every shade of pink or every shade of brown and then gone through all of my stamps to find the perfect sentiment and then the perfect flower. And it, you know, it probably would have taken me 3 times as long to make these 50 cards as it did with the limited supplies I had in my camper. So it was a great experiment, and it's something that I do want to incorporate more often. Another method that I did last month was when I make one of my goals is to make at least 5 personal 12 by 12 scrapbook pages every month. And normally when I do that, I have little pieces of pattern paper that are left over that I throw into my bag. And so instead of putting it into my bag, when I was done, I took an extra couple minutes. I think it maybe took me 5. I took those scraps, those few scraps that were left, and I made 3 kind of simple, basic cards like this, but I made 3 cards in like 5 minutes. So when I have the time, I definitely want to do that just to save the scraps from my stash. And then I know I'm not always going to have time to do that, or I'm not always going to have time to sort through my scraps. It's not something that I feel like I can do every month, but I would like to do this at least several times a year just to try and keep, you know, my mess of scraps from becoming too overwhelming. And I think that was the big thing too, is I broke it up into 2 pieces. I went through and made the kits. So I wasn't necessarily thinking about card design at the time. I just tried to put things in a usable size and shape and similar kind of format. And then I did the cards separate. So it kind of became less overwhelming than just sitting down with a whole bag of scraps thinking, oh gosh, where do I start? So if anybody thinks like they'd like to try it, I say go for it. It worked really well for me. If you have a method that you use to go through your scraps, you know, or any ideas that you've seen or heard of about using up your scraps, please put that in the comments below, because I want to know. I'm sure everybody else would love to know. We're all in the same boat, just trying to use up our stash. And I made a small dent in what I have in my scrap bags and boxes, but I haven't even touched the scraps of pattern paper that are in my drawers with everything. So I could work on scraps for years probably and still not be done. But I hope you guys found this idea helpful. If so, please be able to give this video a thumbs up. And then if you haven't already, subscribe, because my goal with this channel is to give you guys functional and useful ideas on how to use up your stash. Because there are so many of us that have hoarded forever, or we hoard the scraps, you know, and we hoard the paper, and now we have so much of everything. It's time to use it up, get it out of the drawer, and get it onto a project. I promise you'll feel better once you do. But I thank you guys for your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.